brighter colours there over parts of the Midlands, Wales and northern England. The southeast and East Anglia staying dry until the evening when there is the risk of some heavy thundery showers, but they'll be somewhat hit and miss. By Sunday, there's still a chance of some showers, but mostly across the south, turning drier through next week, but also quite a bit cooler.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, it's 3 o'clock. Hello and welcome to The Briefing. I'm Arlene Foster and today I'm joined in the studio by the Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill. Well, here's what's coming up over the next hour. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has introduced a new bill to override parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol. I'll speak to Conservative MP Craig McKinlay. I'm joined by an international human rights lawyer to discuss the latest on the injunction preventing the Home Office from setting off its first plane to Rwanda. Could the plan have ever worked at all? GB News' Paul Hawkins reports live from a scorching Gatwick Airport amid chaos and cancellations. And a level 3 heat alert has been issued for parts of the UK as some areas reach temperatures of 34 degrees. Our London reporter, Alice Porter, tells us how people are coping in the hottest part of the country. But give me your political briefing. Send in your views and opinions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me @gbnews. But first, here's your latest news headlines with Rihanna.
Arlene, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 3. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. A former soldier has been convicted of murdering his neighbours following a row over parking. Stephen and Jennifer Chappell were each stabbed 6 times by 35-year-old Colin Reeves at their home in Somerset last November. Their children were asleep upstairs at the time. Reeves, who served in Afghanistan, had denied murder but pleaded guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. Thousands of flights are being cancelled over the next 2 months, affecting the travel plans of holidaymakers. London Gatwick is cutting the number of daily flights from 900 to 825 in July and 850 in August to help tackle staffing problems. The airport says it's taking the decision to help give passengers a more reliable and better standard of service. Gatwick Airport, meanwhile, says staff shortages weren't a factor in the death of a disabled passenger as he was leaving a plane. The incident occurred while staff were helping 3 passengers with restricted mobility get off the aircraft. The man reportedly fell down an escalator after disembarking without a helper. A formal investigation is underway. Hundreds of railway workers at South Eastern will vote on whether to strike as disputes over pay and jobs continue. The ballot opens next week and closes on the 11th of July, which could see strikes start from July the 25th. That as half of rail lines close on Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday of next week because of an RMT union strike. The union's also staging a 24-hour walkout with Unite on the London Underground on Tuesday. Now, temperatures have reached 32.4 degrees Celsius at Heathrow and could climb further still to 34 degrees Celsius in parts of the southeast. The Met Office has issued a level 3 heat health alert for London, the east of England and the southeast. They're issued to help healthcare services prepare for possible increases in demand due to rising temperatures. Meteorologist Alex Deakin says the heat is unusual for this time of year.
Today is the hottest day of the year so far, actually hotter than any temperature recorded last year. So we've already beaten last year's record. It is pretty early. It's unusual to get these kind of temperatures in June. If we get 34 today, which we may get close to, it'll be the third time in the last 6 years that we've hit 34 Celsius in June. But we've only recorded it 5 times in history.
Julian Assange's wife says her husband will be driven to suicide if he's extradited to the US, where he's facing charges of espionage. The WikiLeaks founder has 14 days to appeal the Home Secretary's decision. The Home Office said the UK courts have found extradition is compatible with his human rights, including his right to a fair trial. He's wanted by the American authorities over documents leaked in 2010 and 2011. Stella Assange says they'll fight to return Julian to his family.
This was always a possibility that Priti Patel would approve sending Julian to the country that has plotted to assassinate him. We're not at the end of the road here. We're going to fight this. We're going to use every appeal avenue. And we're going to fight. I'm going to spend every waking hour fighting for Julian until he's free, until justice is served.
President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that Ukraine being granted candidate status for EU membership would help or could help the country defeat Russia. Wearing the colours of the Ukrainian flag, the president of the EU Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said the proposal was on the understanding Ukraine carries out a number of reforms.
Yes, Ukraine deserves European perspective. Yes, Ukraine should be welcomed as a candidate country. This is on the understanding that good work has been done, but important work also remains to be done. The entire process is merits-based. So it goes by the book, and therefore progress depends entirely on Ukraine. It is Ukraine that has it in their hands, and what could be better to shape your own future.
Downing Street has welcomed the possibility of the UK hosting the 2023 Eurovision Song Contest if this year's winner, Ukraine, can't. A Number 10 spokesman's pledged to ensure it would overwhelmingly reflect Ukraine's rich culture, heritage and creativity. The European Broadcasting Union's decided next year's Eurovision won't be held in the war-torn country. Instead, the BBC's in talks to host it in the UK, this year's runner-up. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Arlene with the briefing.
Welcome to the show. Well, the government have published this week a bill aiming to override parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol. The EU says that overriding parts of the deal breaks international law, and they've launched legal action against the United Kingdom. On the other hand, the Prime Minister's spokesperson has said that they were disappointed with the EU's decision to take it through the courts. Well, I'm delighted to say that joining me now to talk about this further is the Conservative MP for Thanet South, Craig McKinley. Craig, really pleased that you could join me today. What do you make of the EU's reaction to this legislation from the Prime Minister?
Well, I suppose having sort of looked at the EU over very many years, close to 30 now, I have to say I'm not at all surprised. And what Maros Šefčovič said yesterday, that he now sees the EU as the arbiters of sort of the safety of goods and things in Northern Ireland, I found completely remarkable. But, you know, we know all along that the EU had been using the status of Northern Ireland, a status I've been long unhappy with, as a sort of wedge. A wedge that is, and many of the officials at the time of the negotiations said Northern Ireland is the price of Brexit. I do not agree with that. I will never agree with that. And I see Northern Ireland as a fundamental part of the United Kingdom, just as Surrey is related to Sussex. And it's as simple as that. So I'm pleased that the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill has been published. Where do we go from here? Because the worry is, and you know the status of both the Commons, we've got an 80 majority, of course, but more importantly, probably the Lords. The Northern Ireland Protocol Bill, reasonable as it is, I have a few concerns over it, but it's reasonable. It can only go one way, and that will be watered down as it makes its way through the House of Commons and most certainly in the House of Lords, who always has a number of members who seem to oppose anything and seem to take the side of the EU at every turn. But it's a welcome step forwards. It shouldn't have been necessary. There have been 300 hours of talks between the British government and Šefčovič over the last 18 months. And it seems that whenever he's given a proposal, he just puts his hand up and said, no, sorry, I haven't got a mandate. Well, I tell you what the EU should do. They should send us someone who has got a mandate, who can actually negotiate. Because the salvation to any of the problems in Northern Ireland, and they are vast, in terms of, you can't take a pet from GB to NI, you've got problems with postal services, you've got smaller companies just simply, can't be bothered with the paperwork to send stuff to Northern Ireland, and that is even with the derogations that we've given ourselves. The EU has now said it wants to take infraction action against us. This is a status that cannot continue. And I think the doctrine, and it's quite a clear international doctrine, of necessity has very much been reached, because how can you continue talking to a counterparty who simply won't talk? And I wonder whether the EU has really looked at its own document, the Northern Ireland Protocol, because there is salvation throughout that document. I mean, Article 1 says very clearly that the protocol, has no prejudice against the very, very important 1998 agreement. That is what is at stake here, because things are unsettled in Northern Ireland, as you'll be fully aware. The unionist community, who actually got more seats than any other community in the recent elections, are unhappy. They're desperately unhappy with the Northern Ireland Protocol. If we look at Article 13.8 of the Northern Ireland Protocol, it states very clearly that this protocol can be superseded, and any provisions that are changed will be the new protocol. There is Article 16, of course, which is the safeguarding clause. Now, there's only one party that's actually reached for that thus far since we left the European Union, and that's the EU. About the vaccine. I'd call it the vaccine row. We haven't reached for it, but it's very clear that there are societal problems, there are diversion of trade, which that article actually allows for. And even further than that, within the actual withdrawal agreement, the entirety of the withdrawal agreement in Article 1645, it allows the joint committee, a committee between UK appointees and EU appointees, to actually make changes to the protocol. The salvation is there, but nobody is talking. And so hence, quite reasonably, in my view, we have to do something unilaterally, and I wish it every support. But I do understand the concerns of the DUP and others, that they're being asked to reform the Assembly on the laying of a second reading of this bill.
Yeah.
And that's on the assumption. I don't know what the DUP think about it fully. I've obviously had some discussions. But if it is deemed good enough, well, it'll only go one way, as I described. It'll only get weaker. And I can understand the concerns of the DUP.
Let me ask you about the negotiating point, because a lot has been made from the Irish government, for example, Simon Coveney, where he says, oh, we need to have negotiations now and we have to get into negotiations. And then the very next day, Maros Šefčovič, who's the lead on this for the European Union, says, no, I'm not having any more negotiations. That's the end of it. Well, Which is it? Because it's very confusing for people when they see what I think is quite disingenuous from the European Union, when they have all of this shock and awe about this legislation. Well, what did they expect when they didn't change their mandate, and yet they had the command paper from last July?
Yes, exactly. Well, the command paper was very important, very interesting, but there seems to be no action on that at all from the EU side. And I do find the position of the Republic of Ireland really rather peculiar now. I mean, it is what we're proposing in the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill does not upset, threaten or change anything to do with the EU's much vaunted single market. It has protections within there to make sure that we have trusted trader schemes, that there will be proper enforcement of goods that are arriving in Northern Ireland through a green channel or a red channel. I mean, I really would lay down the gauntlet now to the EU and to the Republic and say, this is what we're going to do. If you're still unhappy, well, you better put a border up, because I know one party that never, ever will, and that is the UK. And that's the position that I take. But I think the Republic is now possibly starting to see what the EU is all about. The Republic is very, very intertwined in trading terms with the United Kingdom, far more so than it is with other countries in the EU. I would have thought it's time that they exerted their pressure. They've always seemed to be able to exert pressure within the European Union. They're a member, we're not. And come to the table and start saying to their EU masters, I would say, come on, we've got to solve this, because this is an economy that's important. It's north-south as well as east-west. We understand the concerns of the UK government. We can live with it. Let's get on and do a deal. I'd rather us do a deal, frankly, than a Northern Ireland Protocol bill. I think a deal is there to be done. But what are you meant to do when the other party just put their hands up and say, I'm sorry, I haven't got the mandate? It's a bit like going to, buy a house and you can't give an offer, and they say, well, I haven't got the power to take that offer. I've got to go and revert to someone else. And that someone else never comes along. So I understand the UK's frustration. I certainly understand the frustration of the unionist community in Northern Ireland, and this has to be solved. I mean, you know my position on Brexit issues. I think my Northern Ireland Protocol bill would be tougher still, but as it currently stands, I'm comfortable enough with it, if you're comfortable enough with it, and that's where I am with things.
Well, Craig, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon and for giving us your views. I have to say, if there is a trade war between the EU and the United Kingdom, of course, the people that will suffer the most are the Republic of Ireland, because they do a lot of trade with the United Kingdom. So, Henry, you heard Craig McKinley there, obviously a Brexiteer, someone who believes in Brexit and believes that we need to deal with the Northern Ireland Protocol. I mean, what have you made of the various voices this week around this legislation?
I think the most disheartening one for me was the news a few days before the legislation was made public that the Prime Minister was joining the Chancellor and Michael Gove, who is the man nominally in charge of the government's union policy, to the extent that it has one, in criticising Liz Truss for bringing it forward. Now, if I were Brussels or Dublin, and I was thinking, is the government serious about picking this fight, having this trade war, that kind of story is exactly the kind of thing that would encourage me to be belligerent. Because I'd be thinking, right, if we tough this out, Liz Truss doesn't have the Prime Minister's full support, the government will probably fold, much like Boris Johnson did the first time. So, obviously, there are always elements, as Craig says, there are always elements that are prepared to take the EU side in any discussion. We're in this very strange situation where people insist at once that an invisible economic border is part of the Belfast Agreement, which it isn't, that it is essential to maintain the Belfast Agreement, but simultaneously that the EU would be entirely justified in putting one up. So that's taken as granted, but given the government has a large overall majority, if the government were united on this question, that would be enough to ensure that we could get this bill through. What I'm worried about is, whilst it is great to see the Conservative Party moving towards a stronger position on Northern Ireland, I am worried that they haven't done necessarily the work, and especially the Treasury, which always tends to prioritise economic considerations over anything else, will undermine efforts to hold the line in what could potentially be a very difficult confrontation with the European Union.
And as you rightly said, what we need is unity at this point from the Conservative Party, and it was disappointing to see those reports coming through because, of course, the Conservative Party isn't just the Conservative Party, it's the Conservative and Unionist Party. So surely all of its members should be concerned about the fact that there is this economic barrier between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Surely that should concern everybody in the Conservative Unionist Party.
It ought to, and I've long been an advocate of the party using its full name more. Back when I tried to run for council years and years ago, I tried to stand as Conservative and Unionist. I think actually a long-term structural problem for unionism in general is the fact that the Conservative Party is only a mainland concern. It only stands in Great Britain. I think you and I have had this conversation before. I think that Northern Ireland loses out because unionists representing your own party, the Democratic Unionists, the Ulster Unionists, they're not part of a UK-wide political family. They tend to be sat there with the Liberal Democrats and the others. And I think that does mean that a lot of MPs who have a really instinctive grasp of the Union when it comes to Scotland, they just don't have that connection to Northern Ireland. And I think that's something that we do need to fix urgently as unionists. But it is disappointing to see people who've been elected as part of the Conservative Unionist Party, a party which really got its modern form in the fight to defend Northern Ireland's place in the United Kingdom a century ago, to see them so little invested in a question which is of fundamental importance, not just to the people of Northern Ireland, but to all of us as Brits.
Yeah. Well, no doubt we'll be talking about this for a while, but I could sense Craig McKinley worrying about the changes that would come, not only in the Commons, but in the Lords. But after the break, we're going to talk about the debacle over the Rwanda deportation flights. I'll be joined by international human rights lawyer. Of course, we'll also talk about Gatwick Airport. We're going to talk to Paul Hawkins. He's there. He's going to talk about widespread disruptions and cancellations. But before that, let's take a look at the weather.
Hello, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office with me, Alex Deakin. If you're not a fan of the heat, good news. Cooler weather is on the way. It's already arrived across Scotland and Northern Ireland. In fact, quite a wet morning here thanks to this weather front. It's a cold front and it is introducing colder air, but it's not here yet. Still very warm across a good part of England and Wales and staying that way well into the evening. A balmy summer's evening over the Midlands, southern counties of England and Wales. Still a bit misty around the coast in the southwest and a little bit of rain on that weather front trickling into northern England and North Wales, but turning drier across Scotland and Northern Ireland this evening with just a few showers and a fairly brisk wind in the far northwest. Much more comfortable conditions as well with that cold front introducing the fresher air, but another very warm and difficult night for sleeping across the southeast, 17, 18, the low in the London area. And still very warm and humid in the southeast on Saturday, and still mostly dry here with hazy sunshine, but a very different day across the Midlands, central parts of Wales, South Wales and East Anglia, with some heavy rain developing and temperatures significantly lower. Generally dry across northern England, but with a fair bit of clouds. Sunny spells for Scotland and Northern Ireland, and just a few showers in the far northwest. Again, that contrast with comfortable conditions across the north. One more very warm day across the southeast, but temperatures much lower than today across that central slice, where some of the rain will be on the heavy side and last well into Saturday evening before slowly pushing further south and introducing the cooler conditions more widely as we go into Sunday. Now, Sunday will be a bit messy, but expect some showers across the south, a greater chance of showers in the southeast and certainly for the southwest, but much of the Midlands northwards looking dry and bright on Sunday. Just a few scattered showers in the far north with the winds coming down from the north. It isn't going to be warm here with temperatures only 13 or 14, and mostly we're in the high teens at best. So it is turning quite a bit cooler as we go through the course of this weekend. Bye for now.
I'm Liam Halligan. Join me every weekday at 1 p.m. for On the Money, your daily dose of economics, business and consumer news. I've got 25 years experience covering economics and finance. We hold grown-up discussions with a host of experts who really know their stuff. We can't buy gas and store it. That was a mistake, wasn't it?
I think it was a mistake.
Even you, Liam, don't have a crystal ball.
Inflation's a real threat.
Every weekday at 1, you're On the Money.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
every morning from 6 o'clock. We'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
Welcome back. So the row over the government's plans to send illegal migrants to Rwanda has taken another turn this week. The first flight, which was expected on Tuesday, was cancelled minutes before taking off after the European Convention on Human Rights blocked it. In the wake of this cancellation, many are calling for the UK to pull out of the convention. So what next in the Rwanda saga, and could the plans ever have gone ahead at all? Well, joining me now to discuss the latest on the Rwanda migrant situation is international human rights lawyer David Haig. David, thank you for joining me. And first of all, before we get into what happened this week, what is your view on the Rwanda policy generally? Is it a good policy, or did you think it was wrong to start with?
I think when you good afternoon, Arlene. I think when you actually commented that it's a debacle, I think you hit the nail on the head there. But one wonders if it's a debacle that was actually planned by the government, because at the start of the programme, I think you raised a very good question when you said, could it have ever worked? Now, when we look at the Queen's speech, there was a commitment to introduce a Bill of Rights to replace the Human Rights Act. And it's the Human Rights Act that is the precise reason why this policy is now stalled. So the question I have is, why did the government not wait for the Bill of Rights to be implemented, knowing that obviously these challenges were going to be made? They knew that this was going to happen. They knew there would be challenges in the court. There's nothing unexpected of what is happening. So it does, I think, raise some serious questions as to why this has been allowed to happen at the cost of the taxpayer.
And of course, David, you're right to say this isn't the first time that the Human Rights Act has been used to stop deportations. It's been happening for quite some time. But I think this is a new policy. One would have thought it would have been checked against the legislation that's already in place. But maybe you're suggesting the whole point of it was to raise anger about the Human Rights Act so that they could then move to the next stage of dealing with that. Is that what you're essentially saying?
Yeah. The timing seems very suspicious, because as soon as all of this, everybody's been the outrage from both sides, and then all of a sudden it's references to the ECHR and again references to what will be in the Bill of Rights. If you are implementing this policy, The government must have known that it would come for legal challenges. Why then implement it now and not after the new legislation for human rights that they're implementing? It doesn't make sense, because all that you've got now is clear uncertainty that's unacceptable for everybody involved, and a significant waste of taxpayers' money. I mean, I think it's reported that the plane alone cost $500,000. So the question is, why is this being done in this way? It seems very, very shoddy and unplanned, but evidently it can't have been.
Yeah, and David, I noticed that you mentioned the cost of the plane, but I think it's in the region of £12,000 per person to deport them to Rwanda. But apparently this is going to be tried again and again. But what did you make of the fact that Priti Patel has now launched a social media campaign to try and stop unaccompanied minors, families from coming across the channel? Obviously, this is continuing to be a huge problem, which is why they probably went ahead instead of waiting for the change to the legislation.
Yeah, I think you asked me at the outset as well what I think about the policy, and there obviously is a serious issue that we have with migrants. It's one that needs dealing with, but I don't think it's one that you're going to be able to deal with just a social media campaign by Priti Patel or just this particular policy. There are many things I think that need to be implemented to ensure that the problem of the migrants goes away. So obviously, what you do with the migrants when they come to the UK, the actual protection, promotion of their human rights or not, but also providing other routes legally for migrants to come into the UK, which is not, the type of people that come across don't have legal routes in. So, for instance, you could have unskilled workers visas, things like that, humanitarian visas, which we don't have in the UK. So I think there needs to be a proper, full and detailed review of the issue. But that hasn't happened. And I think with Priti Patel, as you mentioned, now using social media, I mean, that's going to be, I think, as ineffective as their policy so far in relation to Rwanda.
Well, I think there's a real desperation in government to deal with this, because we've seen the numbers go up and up in terms of the numbers that are coming across to the UK, crossing a number of countries to get here, of course, and that's part of the problem. But I just wanted, before I let you go, David, ask you about another human rights story that's in the news today, and that is the fact that the Home Secretary has signed off on Julian Assange being extradited to the United States. Of course, there was a court case back in April. She had 2 months to decide whether to sign off on that. She has now done that. What do you make of that?
I mean, I think it was expected that Priti Patel would make that decision. And again, it boils down to the Human Rights Act. And that is the legislation that Julian Assange and his lawyers have been using to defend these extradition requests. And now what we've seen as well is that the WikiLeaks has made a statement that they are going to appeal the decision. So it will now go back to the High Court, who will review the original immigration decision of the lower court and the decision of the Home Secretary. So it's going to get more and more legal routes, and it's not going to really advance. So again, one wonders why the UK government didn't wait until its new Bill of Rights is enshrined into law, as opposed to relying on the Human Rights Act, which they're seeking to abolish.
Very interesting, David. Thanks for joining me this afternoon and giving us some clarity on those very complicated issues of law. Henry, I'm going to come briefly to you now, just on the Rwanda situation. You heard David say there that he thought that this was a way of trying to highlight the Human Rights Act again. Do you agree with that?
No, not especially, just because I think he credits the government with too much strategic thinking, first of all. But the second thing is that there's no reason people talk about the British Bill of Rights. That's a complete red herring. That would do nothing to change this, because we would remain within the ECHR legal framework, and you'd still be able to refer cases to Brussels, Strasbourg, in which case Strasbourg judges would be making these judgments. The question with the ECHR is, are you in it or not?
Yes.
And we've had government spokespeople alluding to that. But the Human Rights Act, if you just change the name of the Human Rights Act, as long as it's still transferring ECHR corpus of law into British law, you'll have exactly the same problem, and the Bill of Rights will solve nothing.
Yeah, so it's a more fundamental question. Yeah. And I mean, when you look at Australia and countries like that who don't have membership of the ECHR, and you see they are able to deport people and deal with the immigration crisis. So this is a story, again, that will run and run, Henry.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's fair to say. But coming up next, GB News' Paul Hawkins is at Gatwick Airport to report on the widespread disruptions and cancellation. And as the government ethics advisor quits from his job, Boris Johnson is considering scrapping the role altogether. Finally, temperatures in Britain are expected to rise again today, with parts of southern England predicted to reach a sweltering 34 degrees. All of this and more. But first, here's Rhiannon with your news headlines.
Arlene, thank you. It's 3:32, your top stories from the GB newsroom, and we start with some breaking news. The Prime Minister is believed to be in Kyiv to show his support for Ukraine. We'll bring you more on this story as it develops. A former soldier has been convicted of murdering his neighbours following a row over parking. Stephen and Jennifer Chappell were both stabbed 6 times by Colin Reeves at their home in Somerset last November. Their children were asleep upstairs at the time. Thousands of flights are being cancelled over the next 2 months, affecting the travel plans of holidaymakers. London Gatwick is cutting the number of daily flights from 900 to 825 in July and 850 in August to help tackle staffing problems. The airport says it's taking the decision to help give passengers a more reliable and better standard of service. Temperatures have reached 32.4 degrees Celsius at Heathrow and could climb further still to 34 degrees in parts of the southeast. The Met Office have issued a level 3 heat health alert for London, the east of England and the southeast. That's the second highest level and means there are risks to vulnerable people. Julian Assange's wife says her husband will be driven to suicide if he's extradited to the US, where he's facing charges of espionage. The WikiLeaks founder has 14 days to appeal the Home Secretary's decision. The Home Office said the UK courts have found extradition is compatible with his human rights, including his right to a fair trial. And Downing Street has welcomed the possibility of the UK hosting the 2023 Eurovision Song Contest if this year's winner, Ukraine, can't. A Number 10 spokesman's pledged to ensure it would overwhelmingly reflect Ukraine's rich culture, heritage and creativity. The European Broadcasting Union's decided next year's Eurovision won't be held in the war-torn country. And that's it for us. Here we'll be back in half an hour. Now it's back to Arlene Foster with...
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound is 1.221 to the dollar and 1.66 to the euro. 1.166 to the euro, apologies. And the price of gold currently stands at £1,507.89 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to the briefing. It's just 37 minutes past 3 in the afternoon. Tens of thousands of people hoping for a summer getaway have been hit by travel chaos in recent weeks, with flights across the UK being either delayed or cancelled. In a bid to tackle further mayhem, Gatwick Airport has instructed its airlines to reduce the number of departures to 825 per day in July and 850 in August, and that's down from 900 daily in previous years. Gatwick hopes that this will make the summer flight timetables deliverable in light of staff shortages that have helped cause cancellations and delays. Well, our national reporter Paul Hawkins now joins us live from Gatwick Airport. Paul, tell us what's going on in Gatwick.
Well, what's going on today is there's a few cancellations, but passengers are on the whole making it through the terminal and getting on their scheduled flights on time, as long as it's not one of those cancellations today. Looking over the summer, as you say, Gatwick essentially are trying to take control of the problem. I had a briefing with them earlier and they told me that they've done some research, and essentially what they've found out is that there's not enough ground control staff to help service the airline's needs. And so they've instructed the airlines to reduce the number of scheduled departures throughout July and August. That equates to about 5% of the total flights affected from this airport. So the chances, if you are flying from Gatwick in July and August, that it's going to be your flight are pretty slim. If it is your flight, you'll get an email about it in the next few days. The alternative will be to go on and with the same airline on the same route, but at a slightly different time, maybe within 24 hours, give or take, plus or minus either way. And the alternative is to then maybe take a same route but a different airline. And a very, very, very small amount of that 5% will end up having to significantly change their holiday. But we talk about chaos. The airline industry, the airport admits, yeah, OK, over the Jubilee weekend there were problems. So this is about giving 6 weeks' notice that your flight could possibly be cancelled, and they're getting ahead of the curve. They're taking some of the control back from the airlines and saying, look, you're going to have to change the number of flights. You're going to have to reduce the number of flights because you simply don't have the numbers of staff in place yet. In terms of security staff, they are employed by the airport. Here at Gatwick, they're employing 400 more people. Their target is 450. Those people are due to start work in the next couple of weeks. So they're bringing in more security staff, and they're trying to get ahead of the problem so that when people turn up to the airport, they don't have these last-minute cancellations and they can plan accordingly.
Yeah, Paul, I mean, Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary, has said that he wanted aviation to gear up more. Meanwhile, the aviation sector have said, look, we told you there was going to be a problem back in January. So each of them are saying, look, we told you this was going to happen. Grant Shapps says, well, why didn't you do anything about it? I mean, for a lot of people, and you say it's 5% and it's only going to impact on perhaps not as many as people might think, but I was looking at 5%, and that's up to an estimated 800,000 people we're talking about. And those people have booked flights perhaps for family reasons at a certain time of the day, and now that decision is going to be taken away from them and they're going to have to go on another flight. So it is going to cause some friction, isn't it?
Yeah, there will be some friction, but I think the important thing to stress is that we need some perspective here, which is that I guess places like Gatwick, airports like Gatwick are saying to the airlines, look, we need to get ahead of this problem. Yes, there was some chaos before. We're hoping there won't be any chaos now, and that we're not saying that your flight is definitely going to go ahead. It's probably going to go ahead, but if it is cancelled, we're going to give you lots of notice. So you don't get that horrible feeling where you turn up to the airport, you're really optimistic, you're really excited, you're going on holiday, and then you're told it's cancelled. And it's that change from being so excited about going on holiday to being really disappointed that they're trying to avoid. So it's about managing expectations. The Department for Transport and the Civil Aviation Authority have written to airlines saying that, to use their phrase, the airlines need to de-risk the summer. So the government and the authorities are trying to apply some pressure. Gatwick's trying to be proactive about it. At Heathrow, British Airways have already cancelled flights, although they gave some notice about those cancellations. So at Heathrow, there's been less publicity there because it hasn't been so last minute. Now, you can expect a few more cancellations from British Airways at Heathrow. If we look at Manchester, the country's third biggest airport, over there, TUI have already cancelled flights. You can expect some more cancellations. Effectively, what the airlines are doing now is going through their schedule and they're looking at where there are empty seats on certain flights and where they can put people onto those flights and then take those flights out of the schedule altogether, which have criticised Gatwick for making the announcement before saying which flights will be cancelled, saying that you should have done that first before making this announcement. But I guess Gatwick are very keen to try and get ahead of the curve so people don't suffer that sort of disappointment.
Thanks for that. I think it's absolutely right that it's better to be cancelled 6 weeks in advance than the night before. There's no doubt about that. So thanks for coming to us from Gatwick today. So the PM's ethic advisor, Lord Geit, has resigned. He resigned on Wednesday, a move not even Number 10 was expecting. And yesterday, former ethics advisor put his resignation letter into the public domain. And in it, he said he was asked to consider measures which were deliberately breached, the ministerial code. And he says, this request has placed me in an impossible and odious position. The idea that a Prime Minister might, to any degree, be in the business of deliberately breaching his own code is an affront. I can have no part in this. So the government is currently not looking for anyone else to replace Lord Geit. And I'm here with Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of the Conservative Home, to talk about this whole issue of ethics in government. Henry, when did we first have an ethics advisor in government?
2006. This is one of the kind of new Labour era institutions. Tony Blair and his team actually legislated quite a lot to change the architecture of British government, and this post really only goes back to then.
Yeah, and what did you make of the letter of resignation? It was quite strong stuff, wasn't it?
It was, but it was surreal because it was really strong, and the strength of it was in complete contrast to the seriousness of the action that he's supposedly resigning over, which is putting tariffs on Chinese steel in contravention of WTO rules. Now, the Prime Minister has had some serious clashes with his ethical team and, Partygate and everything else. These are issues which really cut through to a lot of people. And if he'd issued a letter like this over that story, I think it would have been really hard-hitting. But a lot of people, frankly, are going to hear the government is protecting British steel against Chinese steel dumping and not be particularly concerned about that. And also, if we're honest, an awful lot of countries and the European Union and lots of others play fast and loose with WTO rules from time to time. So this isn't... If you're Boris Johnson's ethics advisor, that's an interesting position to be in at any period of time, but I wouldn't have thought that this is the thing to resign over.
And why do you think he did it then? I mean, why not do it over Partygate a couple of weeks ago when Boris Johnson was facing a leadership challenge?
I mean, the most convincing argument that I've heard, and I don't know the man, so I can't say for sure, is that he basically decided he had misjudged it by not resigning over Partygate. He was getting an awful lot of flack. He wanted to try and salvage some of his reputation, so he resolved to quit over the next thing that came across his desk. And it was just his misfortune that it was this slightly arcane dispute over steel tariffs rather than something more consequential.
Yeah, so that's the second ethic advisor that the Prime Minister has lost, and one might say to lose one is careless, to lose two.
Yeah.
They're now going to review this whole issue of an ethics advisor and whether they need an ethics advisor. I mean, what will they be looking at?
I mean, honestly, I have absolutely no idea. An awful lot of this stuff is quite vague, and also, people sometimes mistake what the ministerial code is because we talk about it in all caps and these hushed tones. But actually, the ministerial code has no real official status. We're not in America with these big constitutional statutes or anything else. It is a guide to expectations of performance for cabinet ministers, and it is upheld in the final judgment by the Prime Minister. Sometimes we talk about Lord Geit or the Ethics Committee as if they are responsible for enforcing the ministerial code. That's not the case. The person responsible for upholding the ministerial code and enforcing it and deciding whether or not something is Boris Johnson. So I don't know what structure they're going to adopt. I think it's generally accepted now the government needs some kind of architecture for policing ethics, but ultimately, in our political constitution, there isn't an empowered external body which enforces these things on Downing Street. Downing Street is ultimately responsible.
So presumably before 2006, and this post was created then, as you've reminded us, presumably before then, permanent secretaries would have said, I don't think this is a very wise thing to do, Prime Minister, or I think you should think about this. It'd be very brave of you to do this in terms of the yes minister's style of government.
Yeah, absolutely. You wouldn't necessarily have had a formal ethics procedure. I think it would have been more assumed that that kind of thing was a matter of ministerial conscience, and it would have been discussed within government. But the idea that you need a person whose job title is ethics is a relatively modern development. That's not to say that they would have been unethical, but it would simply have been something that was sort of run through the entire process. You would say, is this conducive to the standards of public life that we expect? You also, in fairness, had much stronger norms about conduct in public life at that point. You know, I think we think back to the Profumo scandal. John Profumo, over something that today we might consider relatively minor, resigned from public life and then spent the rest of his life quietly doing charity work. So there were much stronger norms back then. But no, there wouldn't have been somebody whose hat was the ethics man, whose job was to pronounce good or bad on what the Prime Minister was doing. That would have seemed slightly ridiculous.
Well, it would, and of course it's the whole structure of government now and the respect between the various parts of government, the civil service, the executive, the legislature. And I mean, one of the suggestions has been that there might be a committee set up. He's already been investigated by the Privileges Committee. Do we really need another committee?
I mean, the question is, what's it going to do?
Yes, exactly.
I mean, ultimately, you have two models of government, effectively. In one, which a lot of people do favour, you have strict codified rules that are enforceable, and they are upheld by these independent external bodies, which have actual teeth. The problem with that is that, theoretically, the Prime Minister and ministers are supposed to be politically accountable to the nation. So if you set up a bureaucracy like that, it undermines the democratic process, arguably, because you have this permanent bureaucracy to which MPs are answerable. And so the alternative is effectively that we simply have to elect better people. And if somebody is found to be consistently not conducting themselves to the standards that we expect, it's our responsibility as voters, and indeed as Conservative activists and MPs and so on, to remove them. But that's on us, not on some committee.
And presumably, I mean, the reality is if you have an ethics advisor, they have their interpretations of the rules. They're, after all, only human beings at the end of the day, and they're looking at the rules and deciding how to interpret them. But as you say, the absolute accountability comes from the electorate.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's part of the problem with the kind of halfway house system that we've ended up with, is that Lord Guyte is not legally empowered. He's not handing down judgments. His job is basically to kind of just go, I reckon that's a bit off, with all the authority of being the government's ethics advisor. It's not a particularly compelling system because, as you say, he is ultimately basically just performing a sort of vibe check on the government without providing any informed legal ruling or anything like that. So I think it would actually be more useful if either we bit the bullet and we went for a more empowered committee with a more... I don't think this is a good idea, but I think it would be better. Or we simply said, look, ultimately, whether or not the Prime Minister is behaving in an ethical manner is for Cabinet and Parliament and ultimately us as voters to police and enforce.
Absolutely, but again, this is something we'll come back to because they are having a review of it, and we'll find out whether we're getting a new ethics person in due course, no doubt. But now we're going to talk about something which is a favourite pastime of everybody in the UK, the weather. Temperatures in Britain are expected to rise again today, with parts of southern England predicted to reach a sweltering 34 degrees, just days after Wednesday saw the hottest day of the year so far. May I say, not in Northern Ireland, nor in Scotland, but here in England, it is very hot indeed. So while many of us will enjoy the sunshine, for those who have suffered hay fever, it could be a very difficult day ahead. Our London reporter, Alice Porter, is at North London's famous Hampstead Heath. What's it like there, Alice?
Hi there, I have to say it is glorious weather here. We've got temperatures, I understand, are about 28 degrees Celsius here, but the hottest temperature that's been recorded in London is at Heathrow at 30.3 degrees Celsius, which is absolutely sweltering. We haven't yet reached the 34 degrees Celsius, which the Met Office were predicting, but we do know that there are going to be hot temperatures continuing on later this afternoon, and they do warn there could be some very high temperatures overnight, which may be quite unpleasant for a lot of people in London and the southeast. And remember, there is a level 3 heat level warning in place for people, so do just watch yourself, make sure you have plenty of cold water and keep an eye on your sun cream as well.
So before you go, Alice, we saw you had a little accident in one of your live hits earlier. Let's just have a little look at that.
We are expecting a bit of regional variation today, though. Oh, goodness me. Do you know what? Shall we let you go grab your hat, Alice? Because I would hate for you to lose it. Oh, my goodness. Has it fallen in the actual water? Where's the hat gone?
No, it's balanced on some reeds.
So a bit of excitement on
what a
Tom's
pickle
programme
I found
earlier on.
myself in.
I'm saying there was a bit of excitement.
It was a bit of a pickle. I found my... It really was quite funny, actually. We had to alert the park rangers to the severity of the situation. They in turn told the lifeguard that was across the pond. The lifeguard came over on a paddleboard and paddled over, and with his paddle sort of speared the hat and successfully brought it back to me, which I was very relieved of, because I brought it yesterday specifically for this report today.
Yes, so while your colleague Ellie Costello was wearing all of her finery to Ascot, you went and bought a hat specifically for Hampstead Heath.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Well, Alice, thank you very much. Look after yourself and keep in the shade, and thanks for joining us this afternoon. Well, I do have to say that Northern Ireland, when I left, I looked at the weather. It was 13 degrees and raining and cloudy. I've just looked at what's happening in Edinburgh. It's also cloudy there. So in the spirit of GB News, I want to cover all of the weather right across the United Kingdom. But here in London, it is sweltering at the minute. And it's something that everybody seems to be enjoying. Everybody's out enjoying the weather. So, Henry, where were you before you came to the studio today? Did you enjoy the weather today?
Yeah, I was in the tiny yard that's attached to the house that we have, and I was trying to get as much sun as possible whilst sort of moving my mouse around. And,
oh, you were working from home. He's trying to tell
absolutely,
us he was working from home.
We've got no office, so we work from home all the time. But it does mean on a hot day, there's always the temptation of, do you go and sit outside? But then you just need to make sure that someone thinks that you're on station and that you're prepared to answer an email and get one.
Do you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of exam weather when you were at university.
Yes.
It was always scorching, and once the exams were over,
miserable.
That was it.
Well, it's like lockdown, like the first lockdown in 2020, the best heat wave we've had in years, and we weren't allowed to leave our houses for more than an hour a day.
Yeah.
So it's always the way. At least we're allowed outside this time.
Sod's law. But anyway, I hope wherever you are in the United Kingdom, you're enjoying the weather and enjoying listening and watching GB News. So you've been listening and watching me on The Briefing with Arlene Foster, and I've been joined, as I said, by Conservative Home Deputy Editor Henry Hill. The show's back every Friday from 3 p.m. and up next, it's Nana Quia.
Hello, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office with me, Alex Deakin. If you're not a fan of the heat, good news. Cooler weather is on the way. It's already arrived across Scotland and Northern Ireland. In fact, quite a wet morning here thanks to this weather front. It's a cold front and it is introducing colder air, but it's not here yet. Still very warm across a good part of England and Wales and staying that way well into the evening. A balmy summer's evening over the Midlands, southern counties of England and Wales. Turning a bit misty around the coast in the southwest, and a little bit of rain on that weather front trickling into northern England and North Wales, but turning drier across Scotland and Northern Ireland this evening with just a few showers and a fairly brisk wind in the far northwest. Much more comfortable conditions as well, with that cold front introducing the fresher air, but another very warm and difficult night for sleeping across the southeast. 17, 18 the low in the London area. And still very warm and humid in the southeast on Saturday, and still mostly dry here with hazy sunshine, but a very different day across the Midlands, central parts of Wales, South Wales and East Anglia, with some heavy rain developing and temperatures significantly lower. Generally dry across northern England, but with a fair bit of clouds. Sunny spells for Scotland and Northern Ireland, and just a few showers in the far northwest. Again, that contrast with comfortable conditions across the north. One more very warm day across the southeast, but temperatures much lower than today across that central slice, where some of the rain will be on the heavy side and last well into Saturday evening before slowly pushing further south and introducing the cooler conditions more widely as we go into Sunday. Now, Sunday will be a bit messy, but expect some showers across the south, a greater chance of showers in the southeast and certainly for the southwest, but much of the Midlands northwards looking dry and bright on Sunday. Just a few scattered showers in the far north, with the winds coming down from the north. It isn't going to be warm here, with temperatures only 13 or 14, and mostly we're in the high teens at best. So it is turning quite a bit cooler as we go through the course of this weekend. Bye for now.
I'm Liam Halligan. Join me every weekday at 1 p.m. for On the Money, your daily dose of economics, business and consumer news. I got 25 years experience covering economics and finance. We hold grown-up discussions with a host of experts